Valentine's Day never meant much to me. While everyone else was out on romantic dates or exchanging overpriced gifts, I spent the night working a late shift at the small coffee shop where I'd been employed for the past year. It was a quiet place, dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background, and an old bell above the door that jingled whenever someone walked in. That evening was busier than usual. Couples filled the small tables, whispering sweet nothings to each other over steaming cups of coffee. But by 10 p.m., the place had emptied out. The only person left was a man sitting in the farthest corner. I hadn't noticed him come in. He was alone, no drink, no food, just sitting there staring at me. At first, I thought he might just be another tired customer winding down after a long day. But there was something off about him. He wore a dark hoodie, with the hood pulled up so I couldn't see his face clearly. He sat unnaturally still, his hands resting on the table, and the way he was looking at me, not casually, not absent-mindedly, but intently, as if he were studying me. I tried to ignore the growing unease twisting in my stomach. I cleaned the counters, counted the tips, and did my best to act normal. But every time I looked up, he was still there. Then, as I turned to grab the mop from the storage room, I saw something on the counter that made my breath hitch. A small, red envelope. I hadn't seen anyone place it there. I hesitated before picking it up, my fingers trembling slightly. There was no name on it, just a faint smudge of what looked like ink, or something else, on the edge of the paper. Swallowing hard, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "You look beautiful tonight, just like always. Happy Valentine's Day." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't received a Valentine's card since high school, and something about this one made my skin crawl. I looked up again. The man in the hoodie was gone. The chair where he'd been sitting was now empty. But the thing is, I never heard the bell above the door ring. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The shop had two doors, the main entrance and the staff exit in the back, which was locked from the inside. He couldn't have left without me noticing. I quickly walked to the front door and peered outside. The street was mostly deserted, save for a few passing cars in the distance. I locked up the shop in a hurry, feeling an overwhelming sense of unease. I just wanted to go home. As I walked across the parking lot toward my car, I glanced around, my breath visible in the cold night air. I tried to shake the feeling that I was being watched, but I couldn't. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my heartbeat drummed loudly in my ears. I reached my car, fumbling with my keys. But as I went to unlock the door, something red caught my eye. Another envelope. This one was tucked neatly under my windshield wiper. My stomach twisted into knots. My hands shook as I reached for it, slowly pulling it free. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I did. "Why are you leaving so soon? We were just starting to enjoy our time together." I felt my body go cold. My head snapped up, and that's when I saw him. Standing across the street, just outside the glow of the street lamp. It was him. The same hoodie, the same unmoving stance, just watching me. I barely registered my own breathing as I yanked open my car door and threw myself inside, locking it instantly. My hands were slick with sweat as I shoved the key into the ignition. But as I was about to start the car, a sound made me freeze. A faint rustling, coming from the back seat. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Slowly, shaking, I reached for my phone and opened the camera. With my breath held, I flipped it to the front-facing view and angled it toward the back seat. At first, all I could see was darkness, but then, movement. A face, grinning. I screamed. In a blind panic, I flung the door open and bolted out of the car, sprinting back toward the coffee shop. My legs felt like jelly, and my breath came in ragged gasps, but I didn't stop until I reached the door. I yanked at the handle, but in my panic I'd forgotten. I just locked it minutes ago. Behind me, I heard the sound of a car door clicking open. I spun around, expecting to see him stepping out, but the car was empty. The back door was wide open, but he was gone. I stood there, trembling, my vision blurring from fear. Then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A new message from an unknown number. "You're even prettier when you're scared. Happy Valentine's Day. See you soon." I didn't go home that night. I called the police. But when they arrived, there was no trace of him. No fingerprints. No security footage showing how he got into my car. But the officers did find something. The first envelope, the one I'd left inside the shop. It was back on the counter where I first found it. Exactly where it had been before. I quit my job the next day. To this day, I don't know who he was, how he got into my car, or why he chose me. But every year, on Valentine's Day, I still get a message from an unknown number. Happy Valentine's Day. I'll always be watching. My girlfriend Emily and I wanted to do something different for Valentine's Day. No crowded restaurants, no overpriced gifts, just a quiet getaway, just the two of us. I found a secluded cabin rental deep in the woods, an old log house with a fireplace, no neighbors, and miles of dense forest surrounding it. It was perfect, the kind of place where you could truly disconnect. We arrived just before sunset. The cabin was smaller than I expected, but cozy. It had a rustic charm, wooden floors that creaked under our footsteps, a large window overlooking the trees, and a fireplace that crackled warmly. The first night was peaceful. We made dinner, played some board games, and sipped wine by the fire. It felt romantic, safe. But that changed the next night. It started around 1 a.m. I woke up to the sound of twigs snapping outside. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon rummaging through the brush. But then I heard something that made my heart stop. Whispering, low hushed voices. Not one, but two voices. A man and a woman. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The whispers were close, just beyond the cabin walls. Emily stirred beside me. "What's wrong?" she mumbled, half asleep. I held up a hand to silence her. "Listen." The whispering had stopped. I grabbed my phone and switched on the flashlight, aiming it at the window. At first, all I saw were trees. The dense, endless forest stretching into the darkness. Then I saw them. Two figures. A man and a woman. Standing just beyond the clearing, barely visible between the trees. They were holding hands. I couldn't make out their faces, but something about the way they stood, their posture, their stillness, felt unnatural. A deep unease settled in my gut. I nudged Emily. "There's someone out there," I whispered. She groggily turned over. "What?" But before she could fully wake up, thump. Something hit the cabin door. Hard. Emily jolted upright. "What the hell was that?" I grabbed the fireplace poker and crept toward the door, heart hammering. The whispering outside had stopped completely. Everything was silent. I peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just the cold, empty porch. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Maybe it was just some weird prank, some hikers messing around. Then, from behind me, Emily's shaky voice. "Dylan, why were you standing at the window?" I turned to her, confused. "What?" She pointed toward the large window beside the fireplace. "I woke up earlier and saw you, standing there, just staring outside. But you never got back into bed." A sickening realization crept over me. I hadn't been standing at the window. I was asleep until I heard the whispers. I walked slowly toward the window, flashlight in hand. My breath fogged up the glass as I leaned in, scanning the darkened forest. And then I saw it. A set of fresh, foggy handprints on the glass. They weren't mine, and they weren't Emily's. Something, or someone, had been standing there, watching us. I grabbed Emily's hand. "We're leaving. Now." We packed up in a rush, throwing our clothes into our bags. Every few seconds, I glanced back at the window, expecting to see someone staring back at me. As I zipped up my bag, I heard another noise. Not from outside, from inside, a faint shuffling sound, coming from the tiny bathroom down the hall. The door was cracked open just an inch, just enough to see the darkened space beyond it. My stomach twisted. I knew I had shut that door earlier. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, gripping the fire poker tightly. I reached for the handle, my fingers slick with sweat. I yanked the door open. Nothing. Just the small, dimly lit bathroom, the old mirror, the empty shower, the smell of damp wood. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. On the bathroom mirror, there was a word, written in smeared, dripping condensation, as if someone had just traced it with their finger. One word. "Stay." My blood ran cold. I stormed back into the room. "We are leaving right now." We grabbed our bags and ran to the door. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, unlocking the car. As we climbed in, I dared to glance back at the cabin one last time. And that's when I saw them again. The couple, standing at the edge of the clearing. This time, they were closer, and now I could see their faces. They weren't alive. Their skin was grayish pale, their eyes hollow and black. The woman's head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if her neck had been snapped. The man's face was twisted into a wide, grinning smile. They raised their hands in unison and waved. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires skidded on the dirt road as we sped away. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was the dark shape of the cabin, fading into the night. We drove for miles before stopping at a gas station, our hands still shaking. I told the clerk about what happened, expecting him to think we were crazy. Instead, his expression turned serious. He sighed and leaned forward. "You stayed in that cabin?" I nodded. He shook his head. "That place has been abandoned for years." I felt the air leave my lungs. "No," I said. "It was rented to us. I booked it online." The man gave me a strange look. "Son, that place burned down in the 90s. Some newlyweds were staying there. They died in the fire. Some say their spirits still linger." My skin crawled. We never spoke of it again. But every Valentine's Day, I have the same nightmare. A dream where I wake up, and the couple is standing at the foot of my bed, smiling, waving, and whispering, "Stay." I never liked blind dates. There was something about meeting a total stranger under the pressure of forced romance that never sat right with me. But my best friend, Jake, wouldn't stop pushing me to try it. "Come on, man. It's Valentine's Day. Don't spend it alone." He had set me up with a girl named Hannah. Said she was funny, pretty, and completely my type. After days of resisting, I finally caved. We agreed to meet at a small Italian restaurant downtown at 8 p.m. I got there early, feeling a little anxious, but also curious. I sat by the window, scrolling through my phone, when a soft voice made me look up. "Daniel?" I glanced up and saw her. Hannah. She was stunning. Long dark hair, deep brown eyes, and a soft smile that made her look almost shy. She was exactly the type of girl I'd be into. I stood up, smiling. "Yeah, that's me. You must be Hannah." She nodded, sitting down across from me. For the first 20 minutes, the date was surprisingly great. She was sweet, polite, and easy to talk to, but something about her felt off. She barely touched her food. Every time I asked her a question, she would pause just a little too long before answering, like she had to think carefully about her response. And the way she stared at me, not in a normal, flirty way, but like she was studying me. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe she was just nervous. But then she asked me something strange. "How long have you lived in your apartment?" I frowned. A little over a year. "How did you know I live in an apartment?" She gave me a small smile. Jake mentioned it. That was weird. I didn't remember ever telling Jake that detail. I let it go. We kept talking, and things started feeling normal again. Until I noticed something. In the reflection of the restaurant's large glass window, I could see the other tables behind me. Couples eating, waiters moving around. But when I looked at Hannah's reflection, she wasn't there. I felt my entire body go cold. I blinked hard, shaking my head. "Number, that's impossible." I turned back to look at her. She was right in front of me, smiling. I stole another quick glance at the window. The chair across from me was empty, no reflection. I felt my breath hitch. My fingers clenched the edge of the table. I forced a smile. I need to use the restroom real quick." She tilted her head. "Okay." I stood up, walking toward the restrooms, but instead of going in, I went straight to the waiter's station. I spotted a young waitress and pulled her aside. "Hey, the girl I'm with, Hannah. When she came in, did she say she had a reservation?" The waitress looked confused. "Who?" I felt my stomach drop. "The girl sitting at my table. Dark hair. Brown eyes. She came in about 30 minutes ago." The waitress's face paled. "Sir, you came in alone." My head started spinning. "No, that's not. She's sitting right there. At my table." The waitress turned, looking toward my table. Then, she took a step back. "Sir, there's no one sitting there." I turned my head. The chair across from me was empty. My jacket was still draped over it. My half-eaten pasta sat on the table. But Hannah was gone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I turned back to the waitress, my hands trembling. "Did you see me talking to anyone?" She shook her head. "No, sir. You've been sitting alone since you got here." I staggered backward, feeling like the world was tilting. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. I scrolled to my texts with Jake. "Hey, man, what's Hannah's last name?" Jake replied instantly. "Who's Hannah?" I felt the blood drain from my face. I typed faster. "The girl you set me up with. We're on the date right now." His reply came within seconds. "Dude, I never set you up with anyone." My hands started shaking. I looked around the restaurant at all the normal, happy couples. But my table, my date, she had never been there. Then my phone vibrated. A new text. "Unknown number? Did you like our date?" I felt my skin crawl. My breathing was uneven as I typed. "Who is this?" "Unknown. Number. You don't remember me, do you?" I was about to call Jake when I noticed something. At the bottom of my text screen, there was a photo, a picture taken inside my apartment. The lights were off. The only visible thing was my bed, and the figure standing beside it. A woman with long, dark hair. My head snapped up. I scanned the restaurant, looking for any sign of her, and that's when I saw it. Across the street, standing in the shadows, a woman, watching me. She lifted her hand and waved. I grabbed my things and bolted out of the restaurant. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a hotel and locked every door. The next morning, I went back to my apartment. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of a break-in. No clues left behind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That night, I triple-checked every door and window before getting into bed. As I reached for my phone to set my alarm, I noticed something red on my nightstand. A small envelope. I hesitated before opening it. Inside, there was only one sentence. "Don't worry. We'll meet again next Valentine's Day." I never told anyone what happened, but every Valentine's Day since then, I receive a text from an unknown number. "I had such a great time last year. Let's do it again."